All right, if E3 is somewhat of a jungle, so is New York in Crysis 3. And we caught up with Rasmus here, who's... First of all, can you tell us a little bit what's going on in the booth underneath of here at E3?
So right now we're in the middle of demoing one of our levels in the game. It's called Dam Busters. It's part of, if you heard about the 7 Wonders of the Rainforest, which is part of the game. It's a wonder called Canyon, which is differently from the theme that we showed in the announce of the game. It's much more open, much more sandboxy. And we're having both hands-on down there, and we're also having a big playthrough with some narration on top from, well, me or someone else, if you don't feel like playing yourself. So that's what we're doing right now. So far it's getting received really well, so that's great.
So I guess it's also the thing that we saw at the press conference with the breaking of the dam and all that stuff. What with having done Crysis and Crysis 2, what kind of feedback did you get, and what did you want to do with Crysis 3 with regards to what you already achieved?
So first of all, we wanted to get back to doing some more green stuff again, some organic green environments. But obviously we didn't want to do what we did in Crysis 1. We had to do something different. But there was also some really interesting aspects of doing an urban-based game like in Crysis 2. So even though the conscious process was not to combine the two, that is a little bit what Crysis 3 is. It takes the rainforest theme of Crysis 1, combine it with the urban theme of Crysis 2. But then because we have this nanodome over the whole thing that has artificially grown this rainforest into like a crazy sprawling rainforest in a very short amount of time, we can push the perception of what's realistic within a rainforest, and we can also push the perception of what's realistic within an urban setting, which is great from a game development point of view, because we can take liberties that aren't going to make people go like, that's not New York, because it isn't really New York. It's just a completely post-apocalyptic take on New York, even though it obviously isn't a post-apocalyptic setting. That's kind of what it feels like, and it means that we've created this environment that is. I personally haven't seen anyone taking the whole kind of overgrown city to the level that we've done here, and also diversity that we created by having these 7 distinct themes just creates 7 very unique feeling environments and unique feeling also in terms of gameplay within the same general setting. Whereas the major shift in Crysis 2 was as soon as the aliens invaded, then things looked different, right? But up until that point, it was urban in whatever kind of degree. This adds bandwidth and dynamic range that neither of the previous games had, which is great because it supports very well our gameplay formula as well of sandboxy gameplay, that we can create these very intricate level designs that just supports that gameplay formula well.
I think the 7 Wonders concept is something that's maybe a little bit hard to grasp for gamers and players, because it sounds a little bit abstract. Could you sort of more in detail, more concrete, just tell us what that means, and sort of, it's not just 7 different levels or something like that, it's different, right?
Yeah, it actually doesn't have to do with levels per se. If you've ever been on a tropical island or in South America, something like that, and you travel around in a rainforest or Borneo or something, they always have very distinct feels to it, the areas. Sometimes you can be in like a river area with big rocks at the side that just feels completely different from the flat grassland you just were in, that feels completely different from the very hilly, very dense area. And then as soon as you make it nighttime there, the lighting is completely different. Also, we can do something really interesting because at night the levels are artificially lit, so we're not limited by the moonlight. There's these massive control towers all the time that basically lights the level as you light a baseball arena or something like that during nighttime, which creates some awesome lighting effects, but that's a different take on it. So at the announce, the theme or the wonder was a swamp, which is kind of like a scary, wet, condensed, claustrophobic, nasty area. The canyon one we show now is much more open. It's called canyon because you have all the buildings feeling like they're basically big rock formations sticking up. So you're walking on all these paths between buildings. And then we're going to have other ones like rivers and grasslands and whatever that all have these very distinct feels to them. So that's probably as concrete as I can be about it.
Is it also a way of sort of sort of encouraging player to use different play styles throughout the game?
Yeah, it definitely is. I mean, we never want to dictate how you're going to play a game, but we definitely want to encourage, and there's multiple reasons for this. First of all, sometimes if you're pushing, let's say, suspense and thrill in a level, it's not really gonna help if people just grab a flamethrower or whatever, or maybe not a flamethrower, we don't have as such, but grab a big grenade launcher, just blow everything up, because that's actually a little contradictory to what the kind of tone we want to establish. So we encourage certain things, and maybe a lot of players will do that. Maybe a lot of players will do a combination of that and something else. Or maybe a lot of players are going to screw those guys at Crysis, I'm going to play it my own way, and that's perfectly fine. But if they do it the way that we kind of encourage, then they're probably going to get maybe a richer understanding of the storytelling and so on and so forth, because what they're doing is going to support the other thing and vice versa, which creates, in the lack of sounding like a cliche, a little bit of synergy there, right? But it's important to note that obviously we don't dictate any play style. You can do it, like you can approach it any way you want to. So.
Because I think perhaps that was something in Crysis 2, that the action got so frenetic that you got sort of a one pace for most of the time, and maybe that's something you want to move away from.
Yeah, I mean, we definitely want to make the game less linear than it was in Crysis 2. I mean, it was a great learning experience for us to make a game that was, in many ways, a diametrical opposite of Crysis 1. But at the same time, there are certain times where there's a lot of value to pull from making that kind of game, especially if you want to create a dogleg or a funnel or whatever, where you want the player to be at a certain place in a certain point of time so that he experiences a certain event or whatever. Then it's good to kind of narrow things in a little bit. Even if you see the demo here, you start out with this big open area, but then at some point you go through an elevator, right? And that has validity, and you crawl through an like an air-conditioned vent, and then you come out on the other side again, and there's another open area, right? So you basically just use whatever fits well with whatever you want to try and convey, and it's kind of the same as when you do when you design something, right? You go out wide and you try all kinds of stuff, but then you need to narrow it in and make a decision on what you want to do, and it's the same way we kind of approach level design, which is in many ways the openness of Crysis 1 is a little too open if you aren't a hardcore player, right? Because it's kind of difficult to understand, what am I going to do here, what am I doing, you know, it's a massive area, but at the same time there is also a lot of validity in doing it like that. So we're doing it, but not to the same scale as in Crysis 1. But at the same time, we aren't having the same kind of narrow experience or vertical experience as you see a lot of time in Crysis 2. It's a very wordy way of saying that we kind of do a little bit of both.
So the bow and arrow is another thing that's sort of central to the theme. And I think it's kind of funny because there's a lot of big games that use that. I mean, Assassin's Creed 3 and Tomb Raider. Sort of, what do you feel that the bow and arrow adds to the Crysis experience?
I mean, we're pushing this concept of being a hunter, right? Prophet is a hunter inside this urban rainforest. He's avoiding Earth being taken over by Seth. That's what he wants to do, and in the process of that he just kills everything, and the best way of doing that is not being seen and being a hunter and feeling empowered. So a bow is a very fitting piece of equipment for that. At the same time, it also has an interesting kind of conceptual fit in the sense that it doesn't fit. I mean, Prophet is the most high-tech piece of weaponry and soldier available in the world, and giving him a bow is kind of like, what? But at the same time, it's a very high-tech bow, right? And you're able to take choppers down with it, and you're able to fire it while cloaked. So obviously, it's a powerful weapon to have. And going kind of primal like that and creating contrast is just always interesting in games, right? It's interesting to have a game in the future, but in a kind of destroyed, overgrown, primal setting. And the same goes for weaponry with a guy like Prophet, right? So, I mean, we could at any point have introduced a bow to the franchise, but it would just have been a bow in a game. Right now, it's a bow in a game that fits the whole setting and the whole premise and the whole development and story of the character and so on and so forth. And when you have these meta layers of value on top of the actual thing you're shooting, it always makes it more interesting when you play the game.
So you're focusing on the single-player aspect of the game right now. Are you ready to reveal anything about anything else? Any other mode?
Only that there will be some multiplayer in the game, but not what it's gonna be. Yeah, but right now we're here to showcase the single-player campaign, because single-player campaign has always been important for Crysis games, and it still is.
So where are you at in development right now, and when will we get to see the game?
We're in pre-alpha right now, so we're still fairly far from release. The game will ship in February 2013. But actually, we're in a really good position. I mean, if you get the chance to get hands on the demo, I mean, obviously it's not release level polish yet, but it's certainly a playable game, and it's going to give you a very good understanding of where we're going, both in terms of gameplay, in terms of AI, albeit the AI is not polished either. I feel like we're in a really good place, and the reactions to the game so far are very positive, so we're very happy about that.
Thank you very much for your time.